So another thing we're tracking for you on the energy markets is a countdown to the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries meeting, which will be happening later this month. Now, OPEC said it has called an informal meeting of member countries in Algiers to help stabilize the oil market. The Vienna-based Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries said in a statement that the meeting will take place on the sidelines of the International Energy Forum in Algiers from September 26 to 28. Now, an expected return of economic growth in oil-consuming countries, including Nigeria, would rekindle demand for oil in the remainder of the year, while oil supply would tighten, leading to higher prices. This will be the first meeting for Mohamed Barkindo as OPEC Secretary General. Dolapo Uni is my next guest on the program to look at some of the issues before OPEC member countries. Good morning to you, Dolapo. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Good morning, Harriet. Thanks for having me on the program as well.
Now, there are talks about output freeze as a possible outcome of the OPEC meeting, which is coming up in Algiers in a few days from now. How feasible is this?
Well, I mean, I think a key part of that talk is the fact that Russia and Saudi Arabia have sort of come to some sort of agreement. They had a meeting and they came out and they said, look, they're going to work together towards stabilizing the oil market. Now, those are the two largest producers in the market currently. And I think if they are able to freeze their output, there's a likelihood that we might actually see a real freeze in the market because the country everybody was worried about, Iran has actually seen its output remain at the same level for the past 2 months. They've not been able to push past 3.8 million barrels per day. So, and we sense that would happen because they need some amount of investment to push their output further, which they haven't seen yet. So we could actually see an output freeze from those two. If we see an output freeze from Saudi Arabia and Russia, that would really strengthen the market.
Saudi Arabia and Russia. It now makes people wonder if OPEC still has any strong influence in the global oil market.
Yeah, you see, the thing is, we have to admit OPEC's influence has really weakened. I mean, OPEC could really impact on the market when they were controlling about 45% of global supply. But as we speak today, OPEC is only about 31% of global oil supply. So, I mean, they don't have that strong an impact on the market anymore. And then the fact that they are not even very organized within themselves also affects that ability. But don't forget, there's so much oil that is still coming on the market within the next few weeks to a month. Libya is coming back. Nigeria also has Kwaibo back. Forcados is coming back hopefully next week. So much oil is coming on the market again. So it's an output freeze, but there'll still be some new supply.
Yeah, and you see, it's coming at a time when most are hoping that the oil prices will be able to stabilize somewhat because it'll actually give us a breather. And Kwaibo is back, Forcados is also back on track. But then it seems Iraq and Iran are not keen to cut output at this time. How much of this is going to affect Nigeria?
Well, yeah, I mean, Iraq is not, and with good reason. There's so much going on in Iraq in terms of wars, in terms of fights, in terms of for which the government is constantly burning through cash. So, I mean, to them, increasing output is just the only option for sustaining their cash flow, sustaining their income. So that we expect Iraq may likely continue. But it's still But for Iran, like I said earlier, Iran is already reaching a point where I think they might find it difficult to really increase their output. They might not necessarily hit that 4 million barrels per day before the end of this year, the way it's looking. They may just stay at this 3.7, 3.8 million barrels per day. But for Nigeria, that would be additional pressure because we are pushing more barrels onto the market. The oil market is reacting a bit negatively, so we're seeing oil prices shrink. It could have small revenue impacts, but I think by and large, we're still okay.
But then what are the implications of the persistent slump we're seeing in oil price on the global economy and, of course, Nigeria?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
What are the implications of the persistent slump we're seeing in oil prices? Oil prices have been topsy-turvy. 1 minute we get a breather, the next minute it seems as if we're off on a spin again. What are the implications for the global economy and particularly for Nigeria?
Well, I mean, for the global economy, it's really quite indicative of the fact that how dependent we still are on oil. And for a lot of the oil-producing countries, I mean, the impact is very clear. But for the oil-consuming countries, the question is, have they really been able to take advantage of the low oil prices to, I mean, buy a lot of oil into storage, build up inventory of petroleum products and the likes? And if you look at the key oil-consuming countries in Asia, in North America, in Europe, you realize that, for instance, in Europe and America, they've done a lot of storage inventory building. America is still a bit here and there when it comes to the inventory. Today it's up, tomorrow it's down. But in Asia, I mean, there's been massive investment in storage, and they are really trying to take advantage to build up inventory of crude oil and petroleum products, which of course has implication for consumption in the future, because again, once you have all that oil in storage, you're able to influence prices better. So again, that's what they are. But for Nigeria, it's a case of, I think, key thing is for Nigeria needs to start looking at, okay, how do we really move away from oil? That's key. Second thing is, how do we reduce our vulnerability to oil? So the question is, should we start talking about hedging? And I think this is a discussion we should be having now, against next year already, especially since we have an idea of where the budget is being set at already in terms of benchmarks. And then I think for Nigeria, again, the impact will still be in terms of how do we ensure that we also reduce the disruptions in supply, so that we can ensure that we are always producing that 2 million barrels per day, which would really help us considering the fluctuation in prices, and how we can even improve production. And that's where the PIB starts to come in again, because that's going to be very essential to see investments that will see increased oil production happening.
Dolapo, this is the first meeting for Mohamed Barkindo as OPEC Secretary General. Any thoughts with regards how he expects his body language and what he'll be saying at that meeting?
I'm not quite sure how much body language will help you in OPEC, but I think from what I've seen and from what he's said so far at various fora, what he's trying to really achieve, which I think is noble, is to stabilize the oil market, see it balance out. We were already approaching a balance in the third quarter of this year. We're gradually starting to see the oil market balance. The gap between demand and supply was down at some point to roughly about 300,000 barrels per day, which was quite small. So we were almost getting to that balance. But I mean, in recent weeks, we're seeing it widen again. And I think what he's trying to do is get everybody to see that, look, we're really hurting ourselves more by pushing out more barrels into the market. Let's get the market to a point where supply and demand are where they should be, and then we can talk about seeing how we can manage the market going forward. So I think that what he needs to do here is really talk to the Middle East producers. That's really where the issue is. They are the ones that still have capacity to increase and ramp up production. For me, that's where the meeting really needs to focus on. What do we need to give these Middle East producers so that they can also come to the table and abide with the OPEC strategy to balance the market?
Well, thank you so much, Dolapo, for joining me on the program this Friday morning, and of course sharing your thoughts with us as we count down to the OPEC meeting, which is in another few weeks from now.